little deeper into it, right? So
Sure.
you talked about analyzing the psychographics of your potential partner or potential customer and using that as a filter. I'm curious how you've seen this work in the real world, whether it's WISI or elsewhere, about, it starts at a conference table or like now a Zoom call and everyone's like, we should do a thing. And then what happens next has a lot of impact on what happens down the road.
Yeah.
And what's like a healthy kind of marketing, brainstorming meeting, idea genesis? Like, how do we start to think about what campaigns and what direction we should go?
Yeah. I mean, this is one of those things that like, it probably behooves us to start nudging things forward bit by bit internally if we feel like there's friction pushing back on us, where someone is saying, no, you only have permission to run that same old playbook and do tactics. But we do have to get to that strategic part. I'm from the world of production, where I'm making podcasts, I'm making documentary series, I'm, building speeches and delivering them now virtually. But, that world of production, the people who make content are typically way late in the discussion and the project, right? It's like, here's this final thing. We know what we want it to be. We don't have the skills or time to do it. You do it. And to people that are in those roles, it always has to be, how do I make things better? How do I make better things? You have to get all the way back to the beginning and be more of that strategic partner early on. So that's kind of like the lens with which I'm going to answer this question, which is like, assume for a moment that there's going to be some vegetables you're going to have to keep eating, where the things you're doing, you're going to keep doing. They feel like table stakes. Again, you're not going to just rip the Band-Aid and change things right away. Right. What can you do to work on more of an organization level or team-wide level to start thinking through questions that provide helpful filters for when you go to that brainstorm meeting or go to that partner and now you're thinking about the thing? Let me give you a real example. At Marketing Showrunners, we want to help marketers make better shows. There's ample reasons why we say that, but it all resonated a little bit with the world, podcasters in particular, until we figured out, we're actually very much not for these types of marketers. And that exercise like transformed our audience from lots of people casually aware of us to smaller groups of people who are super into what we're doing. And now they're taking action on our behalf, sharing our content, subscribing, asking us questions, buying workshop seats, that kind of stuff. The pivot point was saying, so on a brand level, forget the activity we're doing. Who are we for and not for? Well, demographically, we're for every marketer on the planet. That's not very useful when you're positioning a project or looking for partnerships on that project or what have you, or running a campaign or whatever, creating content. Who are we not for? Well, this is where we get stuck, because so often we want to say the obvious, like, we're not for jerks, right? Like if you're a jerk, if you're trying to spam the world as a marketer, we're not for those types of marketers. Actually, what you should be identifying is demographically, it's very obvious that you should be for them. Like logically, you're serving that person, but psychographically, that's where it makes no sense in the world. So with us, we've positioned it as, what are we doing? Ultimately teaching how to make shows for marketers. But the way we articulate it is, we want to help you, the marketer, find and share your voice and make a difference for your audience so that together with your audience, you can shift the culture. Now that positioning came out of an internal conversation around a number of like psychographic things that we are ultimately going to use as the filter, not demographically. Namely, somebody watching this is like, that's a bunch of fluff, Jay. Find and share your voice, make a difference. I'm here to sell stuff. Well, if you're in a marketing job and you think the job is just selling more stuff or telling other people or more people you exist as a brand, guess what? That's fine. We're not for you. High fives, hugs, and handshakes, but we're not for you. And so I think it's not until we have the ability to say distinctly, these are people I'm describing at face value, what they do and what they think and why they exist. I'm not judging them. I'm just saying these types of people over here, they might be in our demographic, but psychographically, they're not for us, right? So we're not jerks. It's what I like to say is logically, you're for them. Emotionally, you're not.
Right.
Getting to that level is really important to make any good decision.
Is there, in this SaaS world, is there some company where you think has that kind of opinion and we're for you and not for you? Because it's kind of a weird tension, because like SaaS products are essentially tools at the end of the day, like right. Input in, output, and like output out. And I feel like very few have been really vocal about who they're for and not for in that way. Is there someone you particularly admire?
It is trickier because we sell like utilities, like you said, we sell tools, and it's kind of what you build with a tool. But I do think we're doing this implicitly all the time. We're messy sacks of emotions, these humans that are making those tools and building these brands.
That's how I introduce myself.
I'm a messy sack of
I'm a messy sack of
emotions.
emotions.
Yeah, that's what I started at probably age 12 when I was listening to like, sappy music and crying because she wouldn't call me back. So this is getting really cathartic. I swear this is just tea. I swear.
3 whiskeys in, talking about
Yeah.
Dashboard Confessional songs.
I still think about her. Look, implicitly we're leaking biases and emotions and opinions out all the time. Like it's impossible for us to just assume the role of very objective observers and actors anyway. So we're better off looking it in the face. Like, what does our team actually stand for and believe in? And that's going to create a way deeper partnership, which, by the way, leads to your first question. How do we get beyond those tactics and playbooks? Because we're not looking at the tactics anymore. We're looking at how do we serve this audience and create this vision of the world that our organizations both share, right? That's the co-marketing element. But anyways, I think like a SaaS company that does this well is Profitwell. So Profitwell used by tons of SaaS companies, and now they're getting into D2C organizations, but they're analytics, they're data, right? But I know Patrick Campbell, the CEO, he and I work together at Google. He has this very economics-driven lens on everything. It leads him to talk about some of the softer things, so to speak, like brand, in very smart ways. He embraces those things that aren't like direct marketing results, but he does so through a very data-led way. If you aren't fundamentally aligned with that, like their content is not for me, because I come at it purely from the human elements, purely from, I know it's all related, but purely from the creative. That's where I've always come at this. Is where I'm happiest. And, I wanted to tell these big saccharine sports stories as a sports journalist when I started my career. So when I read their posts, it's like, I don't fall asleep because they're good writers and good podcasters, but I'm just like, this is not what I'm interested in.
Right.
And I've worked in SaaS, and I could have ostensibly in a past life purchased their product, but even though they don't say we're not for this type of person in SaaS, like on their homepage, they imply it very strongly because their content, their branding, the partners they choose, the integrations they construct, it's all creating this like filter where someone like me, it's not interesting. It's not compelling. So they do it really, really well. I have mentioned Wistia. I think if SaaS is an area where we struggle, look at certain consumer brands that are not massively flush with capital, that are still thriving. You're actually sitting right behind you is a bag of coffee from Death Wish Coffee. So there it is. Death Wish Coffee is not a small artisanal local shop. They're not that little craft thing that people support because it feels good. They're also not Dunkin' Donuts or Dunkin'. They're not Starbucks. They're not Pete's.
Crossbeam right there.
They shouldn't exist. They are like a small to mid-sized company. I think they have 100 employees now. When you add in their warehouses in upstate New York, they're not in like a talent epicenter like New York City or some city. They should not exist, and yet they're thriving. And the reason is they have a very clear sense of what they're all about. They're the world's strongest coffee. They're not about sitting down in front of some exposed brick and typing your memoirs. They're about hard-charging, hard-working individuals who reach for coffee like they'd reach for like a Red Bull. So they know who they're for and who they're not for. It's not demographic based. It's not an age group. It's not a job title. It's very much like the way you think and feel about your life and coffee, and charging hard at what you're passionate in. And they're able to thrive because they have something a big competitor can't really cut a check for, which is deep, authentic customer connection. And so just because I don't like SaaS businesses at large are not necessarily adept at doing this type of positioning and ruling people out, it doesn't mean that it's not worth doing in our space. In fact, that's really the opportunity.
Yeah, I think you're seeing this increasing. If you like poke up and think about it that way, Wistia being one. I want to go to some questions. We got a few. We talked about alignment, especially with a partner, right? And Seamus McGrath asks, how do you know when in a partnership you should offer up co-marketing, right? So how do you kind of date before you get married? How do you make sure something makes sense as an alignment?
Sure. Look, I mean, let's be clear here. I've never occupied a co-marketing position, right? But I've built very many organizational level partnerships. And it never started as, the job is build a partnership. That started as, again, first of all, we're trying to solve this problem for the customer. I mean, right there is a big opportunity. Most campaigns start out with trying to solve a customer or a problem for our company.
Right.
Like
a lot. Yes.
No, like the reason you're launching this campaign isn't to get out the word. it's, if you dig deep enough, it's, well, we built that feature, or we're doing this thing, or we're giving away this promotion or whatever, because like it should eventually help the customer. So this campaign is about helping them, right? So that helps you orient around who the right partner is. I just think we undervalue those little tiny moments of like involving human beings you admire in your content. And again, I have a hammer, which is called a podcast. So everything looks like a nail. So making a podcast as an organization, yes, it builds an audience and builds your brand. It helps somebody, like people who are partner managers, do their jobs more effectively too, because the executives at that business you'd like to reach out to have appeared on the pod, or the actual people you're trying to reach out to. Like there's all this surface area we create as marketers. And I think little by little, we should be.
Oh, we may have lost them.
So eventually when you make the ask of something more formal, it doesn't seem quite so impossible, right? In the same way that when you're dating, to use your analogy, like I met my wife at work, I met her at Google. I didn't waltz up to her and ask her out or ask her to marry me, right? It was like we played a game in orientation together. And yes, I happened to just sit next to her. And yes, I happened to select her card during a game of apples to apples, even though it wasn't the best answer. It wasn't the best answer, but I was like, I'm going to pick hers because I think I saw her slide it my way. So yes, I kind of sort of was proactive about it, as we all should be about our partnerships, right? I was like trying to do these small things to say, hey, I'd like to get to know you better. I'd like, I think you have something to offer, and that's pretty great. This is not rocket science. It's just that we're blinded by these playbooks, and it has to sound like we're very important professional people, but it can really start that small. Like we all have social accounts. Who do you admire elsewhere? Start communicating with them, start participating in the communities you'd like to be a bigger leader in. And then eventually down the road, it makes sense. In fact, they'll probably come your way. So that's how I position it. And I know that's really pithy, but if you're trying to broker that relationship from zero now, it's a cold outreach, right? And those are so difficult. It's about setting up your own consumer behavior, like the content you consume and your social media interactions, to do it bit by bit, or like I said, that surface area of content around your organization.
And for everyone listening, one thing, when I talk to other partner managers, they talk about this kind of crawl, walk, run mindset. Like reach out to people with something very simple, whether it's like a social media swap of like, we're just going to talk about our shared values, whether it's like you're running a conference, I'll help out, or you have a blog post series, I'll help out, and have that step up into something more substantial. I've heard that time and again, because so many people maybe enter in a deeper agreement and realize there's not alignment, and now they have to trudge for 9 to 12 months.
Yeah. I mean, everything I've ever sold someone is like a high consideration thing, whether it's like the workshops we do at Marketing Showrunners, or now like, speeches. Even the book is somewhat of, even though it's a low price point, it's like a high consideration thing because it's a heavy time investment. And I think like the easiest way possible for someone to say yes is for you to spend a lot of time up front helping them get what they want first. It's like one of my favorite partnerships that I did on a podcast was with Content Marketing Institute, which runs the biggest global event for content marketers, Content Marketing World. And I reached out to them and I wanted to tap some of their more famous speaker guests. And I was early doing this podcast, and I hoped maybe they would promote my show a little bit too. And I said, what if we did 5 or 6 episodes? I gave them a good idea, just like pitching a journalist. If you're in PR, I pitched them the story. I was prescriptive. Like it wasn't, let's work together, or will you talk about or write about this? I was like, here's an idea I'm working on. I think you'd be perfect for it. What do you think? And we said, let's do a series called Marketers You Know, Stories You Don't. And I wanted to dig into certain sides of these sort of famous people in marketing that you hadn't heard of before, whether it was something personal they worked on and how it tied into their work, or a past job that they never talked about, or even a more like story-driven style bio, because you've never really heard the backstory. People in marketing, everyone knows Ann Handley. Very few people know she was a media entrepreneur and a print journalist before that. Or if they know that, they haven't really dug into those stories. So if I talk to Ann, well, let's do it through that lens. So the only reason Content Marketing Institute said yes, or 2 reasons. One is I spent a lot of time supporting their content, participating in their Twitter chat, going to their events, speaking at their events for free, not because I wanted something from them, but because I was authentically interested in what they had to offer, and I liked the people. So when I said, do you want to do this thing? They were more likely to say yes. And the second reason is the thing I offered. I pitched them the thing. Here's this concept. It's going to be really cool. Do you want to be a part of this? Because I think you'd make it better. Here's a 7 out of 10. Your important part is making it a 10 out of 10. Can't do it without you. What do you think?
Oh, we're getting a lot of great questions again in the chat. Any marketing or co-marketing challenges you have, I'll surface them to Jay. One we just got from Maggie Reese. So how do you avoid the low-hanging fruit, which is smaller partners offering to do the majority of work for you versus setting aside some time to go after the bigger opportunities, right? So it's the now and the urgent and the easy versus the down the road, may take a while, may not pan out, but if it does, it would change the game.
Yeah. I mean, this is where like, I'm going to pull from my past as a journalist. When you're doing so I was a sports journalist very briefly. You have usually your beat, right? Your beat is you cover a team, you cover a sport, you cover town hall. And if you're trying to level up to become a columnist, you, at the same time you're covering your beat, you carve out some time here and there to work on something that only happens once in a while, which is a feature. Right? So I'm going to do a feature on Sean, and I have to spend a lot of time with Sean. I'm going to call him and tell him what it's about. He's going to say yes. I'm going to spend a couple different discrete calls with him and follow-ups and talk to people around him and build a good picture of who he is. I got to put in the work here so Sean knows that I'm worth talking to, and also because the feature requires it. And you can't let the beat drop. Probably shouldn't say it that way. You can't let the beat drop. You are not a DJ professionally. Although maybe, I don't know. I don't want to tell you how to live your life. You can't neglect the beat that your job is actually requiring you to do. But at the same time, you have to carve out more pockets to make sure you're working towards something. So I don't think this is necessarily like a ask for permission type thing or get more budget. I think it's about how cleverly you can approach your time. It's funny. We always ask in marketing for more resources. And because we're communicative and largely positive people, I don't know about you all watching, I've always felt this need to respond to emails in timely fashion, to attend and participate in and prepare for every meeting I'm invited to participate online in all these different communities and Twitter chats and read social and be on every channel, right? There's your time. Be a bad emailer for a little while. Say no or ghost people on meetings that could have been an email or could have been an internal wiki post or something like that. We have plenty of time. And it's just doing an audit of that and recognizing we're probably not using it all as best as we can. Mm-hmm. So that's how I'd position it. You have these daily things, which is your beat. Then you have these longer term things. And eventually you'd like to flip the ratio. But at first it's finding those pockets of time to lay the groundwork for something that only happens once in a while. And that's how a beat writer becomes a columnist.
I'm going to drop something in the chat. There's probably my favorite piece of writing about writing or marketing is Stock and Flow. It's this essay by Robin Sloan. And it takes a page from economics, which is essentially you have your durable stock, which is your evergreen, the stuff that lasts forever. And then you have your flow, your temporary, it's in the social channels. It's ephemeral. It may be comment on current events and it's gone. It's not as useful 2 weeks from now as it is today. And I find myself applying this philosophy to not only just my content production, but also like time and like larger campaigns versus smaller campaigns. And you can end up seeing the whole world this way, as you just described.
I love that. And there's another term for it. You can, it's not important that we know which is good or which is bad. It's important we know which we are, which is, are you an arbitrage marketer? Or, and if I'm going to be judgy, I would say, are you a real marketer? But an arbitrage marketer is here for the near-term opportunity that this is cheap to get in and I can get a higher return than the entry cost, right? You're arbitraging your way through. So when a channel is saturated, the arbitrage opportunity for paid advertising goes away, as one example. And I think just recognizing, is your team and is your organization an arbitrage version of those things? Or are you actually set up to think longer term and do stuff that, doesn't look like an arbitrage opportunity, but can yield real impact? Big businesses will be built this year on print, right? But print is not an arbitrage opportunity anymore. And the same could be said of podcasts. So that it's just knowing what you are and then proceeding accordingly and working to change the culture bit by bit if you disagree with what it is, or finding a new place that's more your speed.